A Tribe Called Quest. They aren't just one of hip-hop's most legendary groups. No, their story is so much more than that. It's a story about four childhood friends from Queens who ended up changing music forever. It's a story of groundbreaking creativity, of brotherhood, of bitter conflicts, and, in the end, a final, triumphant act that cemented their legacy. Okay, let's get into it.
And right from the jump, that's what made them different. They weren't just making songs, they were building entire worlds, This was music that made you lean in and really listen. And it all started with a revolutionary idea.
All right, so let's rewind to the very beginning. Section 1, the jazz rap innovators. We're going to look at how they cooked up a sound that basically redrew the map for hip-hop. And here they are. Look at them. Q-Tip, Phife Dawg, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, and Jarobi White. Just some kids from Queens, right? But they, along with a few other groups who thought like them, were about to kickstart a whole movement.
Yeah, they were key players in this thing called the Native Tongues. Think of it as this collective that was all about being positive, Afrocentric, and just thinking for yourself. And what's so cool about this is that it shows they were a real alternative. I mean, at a time when a lot of hip-hop was about projecting this hard, tough guy image, the Native Tongues made it cool to just be you.
And this slide just nails their whole philosophy. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 once said their music was about being lighthearted, poetic, and just comfortable in your own skin. It was way less about confrontation and way more about conversation. And that style, it was going to take them to some pretty incredible places.
Okay, Section 2, Peak of the Marauders. This is where we see how that unique style hit a creative fever pitch. The moment all that wit and innovation came together to create an absolute masterpiece. Midnight Marauders. Get this, on the exact same day the Wu-Tang Clan dropped their game-changing debut, Tribe released this. It was a huge moment for hip-hop, and for the group, man, it was the perfect sweet spot between artistic genius and mainstream success.
And the engine of the group really was this incredible dynamic. You had Q-Tip, the abstract poetic, going back and forth with Phife Dawg, the funky diabetic, the hilarious 5-foot assassin with all the punchlines. As you can see, their styles were worlds apart, but when they traded bars, it was just pure magic.
The album's influence was just massive. Q-Tip's production was next level. He'd be digging through crates for these obscure jazz and funk records, and then he'd blend them with these hard, boom-bap drum beats. It was totally groundbreaking. And lyrically, they were talking about huge topics with real intelligence, proving that conscious hip-hop could totally dominate the charts. But with that kind of success comes pressure.
So, after hitting that absolute peak, the very same chemistry that made their music so electric, well, it started to spark in a very different and much more destructive way. Yep, in 1998, after their fifth album, it was all over. The brotherhood that had built something so beautiful had just fractured, and it really seemed like it was for good. So the big question was just hanging there for years. What went wrong? The full story, or at least a version of it, didn't really spill out into the open until that 2011 documentary, Beats, Rhymes, and Life. And wow, did that open up some old wounds in a super public way. I mean, Q-Tip himself went on Twitter to basically disown the film. He felt the director wasn't telling their story right, that the narrative was getting away from them. It was such a clear sign of just how bad things had gotten between them.
But then, even in the middle of all that public fighting, you'd get these little moments, like this one. Phife actually called into a radio show Q-Tip was on just to say, hey, we're good. It really shows you that complicated, brotherly bond that was always there, even when it was stretched to its limit. But while all this was happening, Phife was fighting a completely different battle, one that was a lot more serious.
And that brings us to Section 4, the funky diabetic struggle. This part of their story shifts from the group's internal drama to Phife Dawg's very personal, lifelong fight for his health.
Phife put his struggle with type 1 diabetes right there in his music, right from the jump. When's the last time you heard a funky diabetic? With that one line, he just owned it. He took away the stigma and became a voice for literally millions of people. But his personal fight was also a reflection of a much bigger national problem. 1 in 3. Just let that sink in. According to the organization Why Hunger, that's how many Americans are dealing with diabetes or pre-diabetes. So Phife's story wasn't some isolated thing. It was a symptom of a massive systemic issue. And that Why Hunger article really frames this crisis using the term food apartheid. It's a way to describe a system where your race and your income often decide whether you can even get access to healthy, nutritious food. Now, Phife had the rare type 1 diabetes, but he still grew up in a system that makes it incredibly hard for so many people to stay healthy. His passing really brought this huge issue into the spotlight.
But the story doesn't end there in tragedy. Nope. Against all the odds, A Tribe Called Quest had one more chapter left to write, a final, incredibly powerful, and poignant statement. Just look at this timeline. 18 years. An entire generation grew up between albums. I mean, nobody, and I mean nobody, thought a new Tribe record was ever going to happen. Then, one single surprise performance in 2015, and everything changed.
That night on The Tonight Show, the old magic, it was just there. They said they felt charged by it, so they put their differences aside and started secretly recording at Q-Tip's home studio. The brothers were back. They were creating again.
And what's so wild is that, according to his own mom, even Phife didn't think they'd get a whole album out of it. He figured, maybe a few songs, an EP at most, but the creative energy was just so powerful that it blossomed into a full, final album.
Tragically, Phife passed away in March 2016 before they could finish the album. The group completed it as a tribute to him, and they used a title that he himself had picked out. When We Got It From Here, Thank You For Your Service finally came out. It debuted at #1. A bittersweet, critically acclaimed masterpiece. It was the perfect farewell.
So what is the sound of a legacy fulfilled? They went from being jazz rap pioneers to sparring brothers, and then finally to legends making one last stand for their fallen friend. That final album, it wasn't just music. It was a statement about resilience, about forgiveness, and about love. It was the sound of a promise kept.